Michael Hoang joins me here, and you can find him on Instagram and many of the social networks by going to Michael B. Someone. And that's going to be a clickable link in the show notes for his Instagram because you're going to find all his corresponding links. But we're going to be talking about BRRRR. And that's not because I'm near Fargo, North Dakota, Michael. It is that cold. But we're going to be talking about the BRRRR method here tonight.
Yeah, don't talk to me about cold. I'm here in Houston, Texas, and we just had a historic winter storm this week. It got down to the teens, and we got 3 to 4 inches of snow. So it is a good time to talk about Burr.
Yeah. I suppose down there, people aren't going to be used to it.
Oh, pandemonium here. If there's snow, pandemonium. We shut down schools, we shut down the highways. We don't have the infrastructure to deal with anything. We don't know how to behave down here.
So one of the things that I think is interesting about you, Michael, is the fact that, according to what I've seen, is that you were able to escape the rat race in 5 years, leveraging the Burr method. And I was hoping you could start things off by kind of giving everybody kind of a Burr 101. What are we talking about, and how can they do it?
Sure. So the Burr method, coined by infamous Brandon Turner, is that we buy, rehab, refinance, rent, and then we repeat. And so it's a way for us to recycle our capital and do more with less. Sometimes you get all your money out plus more. Sometimes you just get all your money back out. Sometimes you leave a little money in the deal and your returns are really good. So I'm okay with that.
Well, let's break this down. Are you typically suggesting people find these properties? Usually single family homes, I would imagine. Single family homes, you're finding them off market, or are you finding them on the MLS? How do you expect people to do that?
Yeah, so we find properties off market. So we go direct to seller. We don't use wholesalers or realtors. We find homeowners with or property owners with distressed property that want to sell quickly for cash and they don't want to go through a lengthy rehab process. They don't have the time, the expertise to do those things. And so they want to exit quickly for cash. And many properties are just not ready for the market. They're not MLS ready. And so we target properties that the average homeowner or the average home buyer wouldn't be interested in. We buy them in cash.
Sure. So let's talk about, like, how are you contacting these distressed homeowners? Are you using postcards, direct bandit signs, pay per click, Facebook ads? Maybe you're even hitting them up on Instagram.
Yeah. One of my first fundamental beliefs is that all marketing channels work. A second fundamental belief is that there are always deals in every zip code in every month that are happening. So when someone tells me X marketing doesn't work or I live in Y zip code, there are no deals, that is a false belief that's holding you back. So I've done cold calling, text blasting, I've done direct mail, I've used bandit signs, and I've used all methods and they work. It's just about if you work and if you work your system.
That's kind of interesting because a lot of people who get into real estate investing for that first time, they unfortunately get sold the bill of goods that this is kind of an easy process. Wholesaling is the low hanging fruit where people get into wholesaling and thinking that's kind of a cash cow and they can get in, no money down. But there's a lot of sweat equity we're talking about here.
Yeah, yeah, there is. There is.
No,
I
that's not okay.
okay. Yeah, there are. I've heard of a lot of ways that people can get into properties with no money down, but
Don't worry about it, man. So let's just go into. So when you get the property under contract, let's say somebody comes in from one of your channels, are you the one answering those phone calls? Do you have a service? How does that look?
yeah, so there's lots of services that you could use. I've always had the calls come directly to me, particularly when I was doing direct mail. I went really heavy in direct mail, probably from 2020 to 2022. And those calls always come direct into me. I've handled them myself. That's probably the most important function of your business when you're doing direct to seller marketing. So you want to handle those calls live on your own.
Yeah. When we first started or when we got really heavy into it, we used a service pool of VAs. that handled a bunch of, it's just a call center. Unfortunately, that didn't work very well because number one, unfortunately, a foreign accent really is,
It
is
impacts conversion.
really does impact conversion. And then secondly, they can't think beyond the form that's in front of their screen on their screen. And there's a much deeper conversation that somebody really needs to have there.
That's right. So when we use VAs, I love VAs. I have a VA that works for me now, but they cannot think on their feet like we can. And you're right, they cannot think beyond the form. And I think having a VA answering a phone can be great for screening and setting appointments. However, what do you think when you answer your phone and you can tell it's someone in from a foreign country that you're talking to? What do you think is happening?
The first thing I think it's a scam.
That's right.
First mind.
That's exactly right. So I know people who've been successful using VAs to answer the phone calls. I never have been. I always have the phone go directly to myself or a US based acquisition expert.
Well, with that, let's say you've probably had quite a bit of practice then. So somebody's calling in their distressed homeowner. Can you kind of give us an idea of how that conversation typically goes?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of newbies think they want to jump into the property. And yes, we want to get details on the property, but the first thing we want to do is understand the situation, understand the seller, and understand problems that we can solve. If there's no problems we can solve and the house is market ready, I'm not making them an offer. I'm referring them to an agent. They need to list with a real estate agent. And so we have to identify where our value can be added. Is there a problem in the seller's life? Is there a problem with the property itself? And so then we can move on to a better way to solve the problems. But I always look at it as taking a phone call as qualifying the seller. I'm trying to qualify them and see if they're qualified to get an offer from me. Because if not, I'm going to give them the best advice I got and I'm going to send them on their way or refer them to a realtor.
Yeah, that's exactly the way we handle it as well. In fact, I probably am one of the biggest sources of referrals to realtors in my area.
Oh, wow.
So, well, it just makes a lot of sense. And then it kind of is a win-win situation there because if it's not a good fit for me and I direct this individual to a realtor, more times than not, there's a sense of reciprocity there. The realtor is going to, when they have a deal that they think might be a good fit for me, I'm the one who gets a phone call.
Yeah, I think that's great. We've all heard people say that our network is our net worth. I always try to, whenever I meet new people in real estate in our network, I always like to ask them a couple of the same questions. What do you need in your business right now? And what can you give to somebody else? Because the world is full of give and take. And if people think that they're going to do this business on their own, they are sorely mistaken. Real estate's a team sport. And I've gone to a lot of meetups and a lot of networking events. And the first thing I ask them is, what do you need in your business right now? And people are taken back by that. So I just encourage everyone to give that a try next time you go out. Ask them, what do you need? And then when I save their number in my phone, I add a little note of what they need and what they have to offer. And then in the future, when Jack comes up to me and Jack doesn't need anything, he's an absolute killer in this industry. So I think that's amazing that you provided so much value to realtors in your market, that you're their number one lead source, and you are building your network that way.
Well, and it's pretty quick to identify those people within the market that have the same mindset. It's always been interesting. And I'm sure you've experienced it too, Michael, is that in many markets, it's kind of uncommon to run into realtors that don't see you as a threat or some sort of competition as to somebody to work with.
Yeah, that's right. I think the average realtor is operating on their textbook knowledge or the fact that they think that we are stealing deals from one another. The reality is, I've done deals that a realtor would never want to touch, and vice versa. There are deals that are not a good fit for me as an investor. I'm going to refer them out to a realtor. So it's really a symbiotic relationship, but you've got to find the right agents that understand how to build those partnerships with them. I've been in the game since 2018, and I have yet to meet a true competitor.
Well, let's imagine somebody who has found they're trying to do this for the first time. This idea is great. They might even have they're sitting on just enough money to for a down payment or get some financing in place to do this first burr. What do you think is the low hanging fruit? Where should they consider finding that first property?
So where I got a lot of my early success was doing direct mail, direct to seller marketing using direct mail to absentee out of state homeowners, people who have owned their home for 10 or more years, they have 50% or more equity, they don't live in it themselves, right? It's not owner occupied. And I found that there's less emotion in those properties when it comes to selling them. It's not the house where they raised their children and their family. It's not the house where they had friends and family come over for Thanksgiving dinner. And so I found that it's more business when you're buying these tired landlord properties. And I've had a lot of success in that. But if someone was going to start today, I think the market has changed and technology has changed. And I think there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to pay per lead services where you just pay for every lead that comes in and the motivated leads are being spoon fed to you.
Yeah, there's quite a few services that actually do that kind of thing. So, like, for example, finding these absentee owners. If you head over to Real Deal Cast, I'm about to release a video on how to leverage Deal Machine to pull exactly that type of list. So, Michael, once you get the property under contract, you got it all set up, it's in your possession. Do you have a standard operating procedure or an SOP in some people's words that would dictate what to do next?
Yeah, so before we close on the property, we've already gotten photos of the interior, we've walked the property, and so while we're waiting for title to close, we've already spoken to contractors, gotten bids, we've established scope of work, and we're really just waiting for title company to close the deal, and then we're off to the races with the rehab. I've got properties rehabbed in less than 30 days. And so I've had private lenders who have gotten a check back from me in less than 30 days when we go from the buy to the rehab to the refinance stage. I would also encourage all your listeners that are doing the BRRRR method that you can start talking to your lender before you've closed on the property. So in this case, I had 2 lenders. I had a private lender and then what we call like a conventional lender, like a long-term lender. And so we're buying the property in private money or hard money. I use private money, but hard money's just fine. And then we are then refinancing once the property's rehabbed and once we have a signed lease from the new occupant, from the new tenant, we're then refinancing to give the private lender his money back, and any excess amount of money would also go to you. And then we're in a nice long 30-year fixed traditional mortgage. We can do them together at the same time. So try to have that conversation before you've closed on the deal. I'm talking to my private lender, I'm talking to my conventional lender, my DSCR lender, and I am ready to move forward before we have closed on the property.
Just to remind everybody, you can find Michael at his Instagram, Michael B. Someone, Michael B. Someone. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a quick favor. Share with this episode with one of your investor friends. And if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a quick like and subscribe. So now you've gone through that process, Michael, and you've pulled your money back out at this point. Now you're on to the next one, or have you already sourced the next one?
That's right. So the second you stop generating leads is the second your business dies. And so it was a little difficult at first for me to maintain the discipline, but we're always trying to have the next deal under contract. So we never stop marketing. That's why you have to rely on third party sources to market. Either if you're doing direct mail, we use a mail house. If you're doing pay per lead or pay per click, you're using a third party. You have to continue doing acquisitions. And so in a perfect world, we would just have them stacked one after another. You cannot stop marketing to focus on the rehab of whatever project you're currently working on.
Yeah, especially found that to be the case just because you never know when you're going to hit these people at the right moment. Number one. And then number two, it's always good because that first mailing that you send out, that is like, I exist, and made people think it's a scam. They may not take you seriously, but if they get 3, 4, or 5 of the same postcard in the mail, now they'll start to take you seriously, and you're probably going to start receiving additional phone calls.
Yeah, that's right, and it usually takes between 3 to 7 touches in marketing to get someone to contact you, so whether that's 3 to 7 letters, 3 to 7 calls, or text messages. However, we don't do call or text messaging anymore. There's been a lot of changes in regulation. I find it to be less effective, but at any rate, you are trying to have multiple touches. And I've also experimented with changing the mail piece. So each letter will say something different. I've even had people call me up and say, "All right, you got my attention. What?" Because there's been an ongoing dialogue with the seller as the mail pieces change.
No, and one of those things, I've never been one of those teams that has people just cold calling uh, individuals or cold texting individuals. However, one of the tricks that I did have learned is that adage, if you got to contact them within that first 5 minutes. If you maybe you found this to be true as well, Michael. If you return their call or you text them back within the first 5 minutes, you have a much greater chance of closing the deal in the end, or at least continuing the conversation. In fact, if you go beyond that, your chances can drop as much as 80%.
Think about the human on the other side of the phone, right? If you're trying to order a pizza and you call the pizza place and they didn't answer, you're very likely to just call the next pizza place. So that's why either if you can't answer the phone live, you really need to get back to it. 5 minutes is great. And as time goes on, as we all know, time kills all deals. So when they're ready, when their brain is active and when they're ready to listen and they're not at work, when they call you, you need to get back to them immediately.
Some examples, like what's going on at the moment.
Yeah. So I had an interesting one where I bought a house direct to seller using direct mail. Really, the seller's never really going to tell you the real problem. That's going to be up for you to build trust and rapport and dig and find the real solution. I couldn't get a deal across the finish line and I couldn't figure out why. I went to the property one day to meet one of the family members so they could let me in so we could take a second look at something. And a guy shows up with the seller, who's his mother-in-law, on speakerphone saying, "Yep, don't worry, I'm gonna handle it." Gets out of his car and starts yelling at me. I never met the guy before. Turns out that he was trying to make sure that he was a part of the negotiation, and so he felt valued and heard in the deal. And when we got to the bottom of the situation, we had put on the only issue that he had is we put more than 30 days on the contract for this particular case. We need a little more time. And I just asked the seller originally, "Is this okay?" And she said, "That's fine." And I was okay with 30 days as well. All he wanted to do was just get that changed to 30 days. And I learned that there's always a story going on behind the scenes that you're unaware of. So we made the change to 30 days to close, which was absolutely fine. Um, and later in the transaction, when everything was done, the seller apologized for her son-in-law and said in the past, the family had put him in charge of a couple other rental properties they had in Houston as well, and he didn't do so well with that responsibility, and it turned into a disaster. So he was on a quest to redeem himself and to protect the family. And so if you don't feel the warm reception of somebody, if you don't feel like things are moving forward quicker, or if things aren't moving forward smoothly and people aren't communicating, slow down and try to find the real problem in the situation.
Mhm. No, I can't agree more on that. It's actually kind of, you almost have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, because in many of these situations, when I'm talking to distressed homeowners, there's a strong chance that this is the first time that they've verbalized some of these issues out loud to anybody, let alone themselves. So it can get quite emotional. You have to be very empathetic. You have to be very patient and let them relieve some of that stress.
I never thought of it that way, Jack. That is true because I've helped some sellers out in some really bad situations. This is the first time they're admitting to themselves out loud the situation that they're in. That's
So,
a really good
yeah,
point.
well, it's just right to give them a minute. Sometimes you got to let it be uncomfortable. Be quiet and let them go through what they're going to go through. So, I want to emphasize some of these conversations can take a little time. They're not calling in, just giving you the property details, and then you're going over there with your contract. Sometimes it is a lengthy conversation before you get that far.
Yeah, we would all love a one call close on a contract, but I bought a property. In fact, it's the property that I'm standing in right now. It was originally going to be a rental, but we ended up moving into it, making our primary residence. It went on for 3 months. Especially when you're talking to the tired landlord list and they have a tenant in the property that may or may not be paying on time. Sometimes they have time, and other times they need time to come to terms with what's happened, because you could be dealing with divorce, you could be dealing with a death in the family, you could be dealing with someone who just has to admit when he sells the property to you, he's admitting to his wife and his family that he made a bad decision on selecting a tenant and the tenant destroyed the property, right? Or it could have been an inherited property that they inherited from a family member and turned into a rental for years, and now they need to sell it. And so sometimes these conversations could take some time, and you have to be okay with that.
Well, Michael, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm going to direct everybody to your Instagram again because they can find all your corresponding links there. Michael B. Someone, Michael B. Someone. But before we dive into the rapid fire questions, is there any topic you think we should have tried to hit on here before we make that change?
Yeah, the money. This is the number one conversation that comes up when I have people tell me they do not have the money. And I go to a lot of meetups and networking events, and I talk to people who had a higher salary than me when I was in the W-2 world, or they have more money than they know. They just don't know where to look. Sometimes that money's in their retirement accounts. Sometimes they don't need nearly as much money as they think they do. Other times the money is in their monthly budget and their lifestyle has grown beyond their monthly budget. I have worked with people to help identify where they're going to find the source of money to do the deals. And then here's the real big source of money: it doesn't have to come from you. It can be from private lenders and partners. In your phone, you have millions of dollars of money available to you. We teach a concept called the deal delta, which is time, knowledge, and capital. Any real estate deal has these three components. It's the anatomy of a real estate deal. You pick one and you partner for the other two. I've never been in a room where there's not excess money hunting for a deal. So if you find the right deal, capital is not a problem. It will find you.
Well, with that, we'll jump into the rapid fire questions, but this was great.
Let's do it.
What lie do real estate investors tell themselves?
I might have buried the lead on this one, Jack, but it's the money. They always tell themselves that they don't have the money to get started. Another lie I found that they frequently tell themselves is that the rehabs are cheaper and the fixing up of the property is cheaper and faster than what they budget for. Those are the two big ones I've encountered.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would that be?
You are more ready than you think you are, and you need to just get started. When I did my first deal and I talked to a lender to get my private money out and into conventional financing, turns out I was qualified for 10 mortgages. I was afraid I couldn't even get one. So every step along the way in my journey, I've discovered I am closer than I realize to doing the next deal. So just get started.
Do you have a book recommendation?
I do. And I got it right here for you. For those of you watching on YouTube, it's Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. Every problem I've ever had in my business, the answer is not how, the answer is who. So find that who in your life and get to the next level of your business.
And finally, what single strategy or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time saving impact to your business?
I got three for you, Jack. It's
Okay.
hire a VA, hire a VA, and hire a VA.
So I guess you're a fan of VAs.
I am so much. Every quarter, I try to automate, delegate, or eliminate one thing from my plate. And so much of what I was doing in the beginning, I realized I can find a VA for under $10 an hour who can handle all the administrative tasks. So we can put the revenue producing activities at the forefront and we can go out there and make even more money. The more I've handed problems and tasks to other people, the more money I've made.
So, do you have like any kind of feedback? What service do you use today to find the VAs you use?
So you can get started on Upwork or onlinejobs.ph. That's where a lot of people go. I've recruited myself over the years. I've used social media to find the VAs directly who used to work for the right American corporations, and I've done a lot of recruiting myself. But when you're just getting started, just go to Upwork or onlinejobs.ph.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it, Michael.
Been too
And I'm going to make sure to have that in the show notes as well.
awesome.